Most privacy fences look great on one side, but the backside is always the ugly side. And a box shadow fence looks nice from both sides, but it doesn't give you much privacy. So today, I'm showing you my box shadow style fence design I built around my yard 5 years ago. Because it looks great on both sides and it's actually private. I built nearly 400 feet of this fence years before I started YouTube, and I get comments about how I built it. So in this video, we're building a changing room that also hides all of my pool equipment. And while we build that, I'm going to break down the entire fence system, from the posts, the rails, the spacing between the pickets, the backside alignment, the screws, and an Excel tool I made so you can calculate your full material cost. By the end, you'll know exactly how to build this fence the way I built it, whether you're doing 20 feet or an entire yard.
So I just made a list of everything I need.
Let's get started by going to Home Depot.
Get everything we need so we can move on with this project.
This is Backyard Transformation, Part 2.
That one's got a serious crack right there. Crack, crack, crack. And this wood is still super wet. You know it's gonna crack a lot more. You see this one's perfect.
So you'll notice that this section sits on concrete pavers. If you remember, I did put concrete under this border, so I'm using post anchors instead of digging holes. I'm going to be lining up this fence parallel to the pavers, so everything looks clean and intentional. The only post that needs an actual hole is the post for the gate.
I'm going to measure from here to here and from here to here, and it's got to be equal. And so with that in place, I'll be able to know exactly where I want my post here. For now, let's just start building it out. Then we're gonna build the gate that's gonna open up like this. And I also wanna measure from here to here, so it could open and stay here, even if someone...
But to place it correctly, I first need to figure out where this corner post is gonna be installed. And I also need the exact measurement of my gate opening.
Pick this as the pretty corner, which is gonna go right here, and I want this to be hidden.
Most pieces of wood have a pretty side and an ugly side, so I was just picking out the pretty side to aim towards the pool and keep the rougher side hidden. Same thing with the hardware. I'm hiding the bolts on the brackets by putting them inside the changing room.
Not gonna lie, I thought it would wiggle wobble a lot more than that. We're gonna grab a perfectly straight 2x4. This is exactly where we need to make our post. And now I'm just gonna make sure to measure 24 inches. I guess we could go 28 if this allows us. Yeah, no, so let's go, we're gonna go 24. My only issue now is the 26.
So while I'm trying to make up my mind about how wide to make the gate, let me show you how to plan out the post holes for your future fence project. The first step is to measure each side of your fence line. Once you have those measurements, we divide it by 8 feet because our 2x4s come in 8-foot lengths. So ideally, your post should be spaced out about 8 feet on center. Just avoid going over 8 feet. Some fence styles can get away with wider spacing, but with my design, I use top caps, which are 2x4s by 8 feet. And if the posts are too far apart, the caps won't line up nicely. For this example, let's say this section of fence is 39 feet long. If we divide 39 by 8, we get 4.875. The number 4 tells us we can fit 4 fence panels of 8 feet, and the 0.875 just means that we're going to also have another shorter panel as well. And to figure out the size of that smaller panel, we need to multiply 4 times 8, which equals 32. And now we subtract 39 feet minus 32 feet, which equals 7 feet. So this fence line would have 4 sections of 8-foot panels and 1 section of a 7-foot panel. So in total, that means 5 panels, which requires 6 posts and 6 holes. And obviously, if you want to add a gate, you'll have to add another post. I can't believe I found my project outline from 4 years ago, and this is the fence we'll be creating today. Speaking of gates, I finally figured out I want my gate to be 25.5 inches, so I'll make sure this post is 26 inches away from the other post.
Let's get digging. I think I'm at the point where I just have to get down on my knees and start doing it with my hands. Loosen up all that dirt.
So I'll just keep repeating this process, loosen the dirt, scoop it out by hand, and basically keep going until my chin is almost touching the ground. My holes end up around 29 to 30 inches deep, which for me is pretty much the length of my arm. It's actually a pretty good workout. It's free exercise. I highly recommend it. I think in about 20 to 30 minutes I dug the hole, but depending on your arm length, your soil type, and how many holes you need to dig, renting a post hole auger might be a smart option. I ended up doing around 30 holes with a Toro Dingo I rented from Home Depot for about $450 for 2 days. If I can give one piece of advice, prep everything before renting the machine, mark your holes, mark your layout, just so you don't have to waste a rental day figuring things out after you've already picked up the auger. You'll notice I'm bracing this post off of the 2 posts beside it, which isn't really how I built the rest of my fence. For the full fence project, I started by installing the 4 corner posts first. Once those were concreted in place, I ran 2 string lines, one at the top and one at the bottom, set about 1/2 inch off of the posts. Then, as I installed all the posts in between, I made sure each one sat 1/2 inch away from both string lines. And that, my friends, is how you get a perfectly straight fence.
I'm gonna make it a bit more wet, but I usually like to mix my concrete kind of how it was right before I sprayed it. Peanut butter that can hold together.
If you're trying to figure out how many concrete bags you'll need, I used about 1.5 bags per hole on average. And towards the end of the video, I'll show you an Excel sheet I made so you can calculate every single material for your own project.
Good and good. Might as well start installing this one. What I had in mind initially was something like this, and the fence passed right over this one, but I think because I have this here, I think I'm gonna place it right there, and I'll keep this spacing equal with this spacing, just so it looks, you know, intentional.
Now I'm going to cut the top of the posts nice and straight. For this small section, you'll notice that I'm just using a straight 2x4 to find the cutting height for each post. But if you're doing a full fence with a lot of posts, this is definitely not the way to do it. Here's how I did it for the fence around my yard. My property is almost perfectly flat, so I used a simple 3-inch spacer at each corner post. I put a picket on top of that spacer, marked the height on the post, and that gave me the reference for my top corners. Then I pulled a string line as tight as possible, and I transferred that height to every post in between. That's the proper way to get a perfectly straight top when you have a long fence. But if your yard isn't flat, you'll have to decide between a stepped fence that drops down like stairs, or a sloped fence that follows the ground. I won't go too much into detail here since my yard is flat and I didn't need to do any of this, but it's definitely something to keep in mind if your yard is sloped.
And then when I see it touches the line, that's where I'm gonna mark it, right there. And I'm gonna hold my speed square. Boom. Beautiful. Put your blade in, make sure you're perfectly square with the speed square, and do the same thing. Okay.
When it comes to actually cutting the tops, I think my method is a little slow, but I like it because it's safe for a solo DIYer and it gives me the cleanest results, in my opinion. I find that I end up with a perfectly seamless cut all the way around the post. Obviously, if you really don't care about straight cuts or tear out, you can always grab a Sawzall. I'm not saying I'm a perfectionist, but I think I am a perfectionist.
Right there, on the money. I need to make sure that this is perfectly square with that, which I believe it is not. How are we gonna find square? I have no idea. Let's figure it out.
I lined this up parallel to the pavers since the dark paver edge was already set perpendicular, and obviously using my very straight 2x4 as a guide.
And now from this, 2 1/8. What you're thinking, I should probably put a post here, and I agree, to be honest. I thought I was gonna put a post, but I only got 2x4s. We are still dead on, perfectly level. Oh! Now we're gonna start putting these little brackets. I just set them perfectly centered. This goes in and you just want to make sure that the 2x4 is flush. And so you see now the top will be perfectly flush with these posts. Maybe 3. After we're going to be screwing them on, this is not perfectly plumb. And so we're gonna try and push it a bit. Yeah, it's gonna bend. I really wish I had a post here. I could technically add another 2x4, but I'm gonna try doing it with this only. Let's go with 64. Okay, a bit better. It's still not perfect, but it is a lot better. 66.5. Which means that we'll probably bring it up all by 1 inch so it doesn't touch the floor. 33 to the center of that. 4.5, 6, 66, 62, 59 or 60, 33, 30. Let's do 29.
If you're wondering why I'm so confused, it's because this fence sits a little higher on top of the pavers, so I'm trying to figure out the exact height to install the middle and bottom rail brackets, so everything still looks perfectly even with the rest of the fence. Always take your measurements from the top of the post, which we just cut to their final height. You never want to measure off of the ground because it's never really straight. On my main fence, the bottom rail is set at 65 inches down from the top, and the middle rail is set to 34 inches, which gives me 2 equal gaps.
Hi, I'm Pedro. Mateo is very confused. One gap is 27 inches, but the other is 27 point something. Can you help him find the mistake? You'll have to leave a comentario with the right measurement so we can save this proyecto. Ciao!
At least I tried almost equal gaps.
Just gonna start it with the drill and then you guys can finish it off. Here, do it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You gotta put it in and then squeeze the trigger while you're pushing forward, okay? Like this. Oh, you gotta keep pushing.
I'm done.
No, you're not done. You gotta put some body weight into it. Okay. Good, do it again. Okay, good job.
I did it harder than you.
High five, you're a DIYer.
I did more than you.
There we go. 32.5, careful with the plant. 32.5. Good job.
I really enjoy working with my kids. Sometimes they could be adorable.
Papa said I can do it next too.
If you keep fighting, you're not gonna get a turn. Good job. There we go. All we're gonna have to do is remove these three and these three screws. We'll be able to lift up everything together.
One thing I love about these brackets, and I think it's worth mentioning, since my pickets are screwed in, I could just undo 6 pickets and a few screws, and the whole panel lifts out as one piece. It's super convenient when you need to bring materials or machinery into the yard, or even to cut down a tree, as long as you don't place a post right in front of it.
Houston, we have a problem.
What?
How did I not think of this? Do you see the problem?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
The air won't be able to come out.
Exactly. We're gonna have to lift it up by 4.5 inches. That's 3 2x4s stuck together.
I was pretty impressed that my 8-year-old figured that out on his own. I guess I really am raising kids who know how to figure things out.
So now comes picket time. I got 6-foot boards, but because there's one step higher over here, I'm gonna have to trim them. And I don't want them touching the floor, but I also don't want them up here, or else from far we'll be able to see the pump and stuff. So I've decided that I will take a board, which is 1/2 inch, and that'll be the spacing I'll have at the bottom. Trace it. And now I'm just gonna go and cut a few boards at this length. I didn't do the paver patio exactly flat. I do have a pitch away from the pool. So as you can see, I'm about 1/4 inch too high here. So I'm gonna go and cut 6 boards at this length.
Then I'll shave a little more off the next 4 and keep adjusting as we go.
If you have a miter saw, use it, but for this sake, I'm not gonna go get it because I don't know, maybe some of you don't have one. And I don't want that to be your excuse.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're just starting out, don't feel like you need a tool you don't have. A circular saw and a drill can get you a long way.
All right, now it's picket fence time.
But before we start laying out the pickets, I want to show you real quick why I went with a box shadow style fence instead of the more common privacy fence. This is the style most people think of when you say privacy fence. It's definitely the easiest to build. Your 2x4s sit on the face of the posts, you just screw them straight in, and then you nail or screw the pickets one after another. The wood will dry and shrink a little, so you'll probably end up with tiny little gaps, but there's no need to rip boards, no lining anything up. It's probably the cheapest option because it uses fewer pickets, and I'm assuming it's a lot less cost in labor. But the biggest drawback, in my opinion, is the other side. I call this the ugly side. So the question is, where does that ugly side face? Do you point it towards the street or towards your backyard oasis? And what about your neighbors? Do they know you're gonna give them the ugly side? I wanted something that looked clean and finished on both sides, no matter where you're standing, on the street, in the gazebo, even from the neighbor's yard, it should look good. That's why I chose a box shadow style fence. But not like this one. This is your typical box shadow fence. So in this example, you could see that the gap is very big and not private at all. All of these examples I'm showing are using 1x6 pickets. So now let's move on to the most popular box shadow style fence using a 4-inch gap. And as you can see, it's a little bit more private than the previous example. There is a tiny bit of an overlap, but it's still not what I was looking for. And that brings us to my design. My spacing is 1 inch and 5/8. You'll notice I raised the top rail so it sits flush with the top, and I put a top cap. This spacing is really nice and private. If someone's walking on the street, the gaps aren't big enough for them to see anything. You can really see the difference in the shadows. This style looks good on both sides, and most importantly, it gives you privacy, but it's definitely not the cheapest option. You're using way more pickets, an extra 2x4 for the top cap, and it's a lot more in labor. Building a fence gives you privacy in your yard, but online, your information is basically wide open. And that's why I want to thank Incogni for sponsoring this video. Your name, address, family details, even past purchases or where you've lived. All of that gets collected and traded between companies you've never heard of. Some sell it to people search sites, some to marketing databases, and some to groups you really don't want having your information. And that is where Incogni comes in. When you sign up, they act on your behalf and they start removing your personal information from across the internet. Not just the data brokers, but all the random sites that buy and sell your profile. They also added something called custom removals, which is great. If you find a website exposing your info, your address, phone number, relatives, you can tell Incogni and they'll go after the exact page and track the takedown. Everything runs quietly in the background and you can check your dashboard anytime to see what's been removed. If you want to try it out, use code Matteo or click on my link, Incogni/Matteo, and get 60% off an annual plan. It supports the channel and you get a big discount. So thank you, and thank you Incogni for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the fence build.
Step 1 is to place a 2x4 across the top as a stopper so all the pickets line up perfectly. It's just a temporary 2x4, we'll just screw it in with one screw. Step 2 is to nail in the boards starting on one side of the fence with a full board against a post. I have a 18 gauge brad nailer. This is not mandatory whatsoever.
And that's because I don't own a framing nailer. So I use 2 brad nails per picket, one at the top and one in the middle. And I use 1-inch stainless steel brad nails. This is totally temporary. We'll get to screwing them in just a bit. Step 3 is nailing 3 to 4 boards at a time before stopping on the 4th board to make sure it's plumb. You might think these boards are all equal and perfectly parallel and straight, but they're not. So we have to do this every 3 or 4 boards, and I'll show you a little bit more about this and why this is important on the backside. It's all relatively easy until you get to the end of a section. Ideally, you want to end it on a full board, but most of the time that just isn't possible, so you'll have to trim the last board down. But what we really don't want is to end up with a board that is either very thin, but most importantly, we don't want to end with a gap, leaving the brackets visible, which is exactly what happened to this section here. Once you get close to the end, say 3-4 boards remaining, you need to just take your spacer and a picket, place them, hold them, and keep alternating without nailing them in. In my case here, I have a 1-inch gap, which is exactly what we never want to happen. So for the last 4 boards, I'll have to improvise and do a little math. I'll spread out the extra 1 inch over 4 or 5 gaps. One thing to note though, you never want to add more than 1/4 inch to your gap, or you might start to notice the difference. You can either measure each gap or just eyeball the extra 1/4 inch. As long as the gaps stay relatively similar, you won't see it, but anything more than that 1/4 inch, it might stand out. So now I'm gonna pre-drill and screw in each board. And every board is gonna have 6 screws per board. So using my string line is how I'm gonna be able to get perfectly straight screw holes. Okay, so I'm just going to show you an example. I try and aim for precisely dead center of the 2x4. So on one side of the string line, I have this loop and put it right here. And then on this side, I'm just going to go like this. And then I just do loops on itself. You could do like 6 or 7 loops. And then you pull on this one. And it just locks on itself, you see? I learned this little trick on Essential Craftsman. Awesome YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. So now what I do is 1.5 inches away from this edge, and I just tap the board there, right there. I don't do it on the string line or else the string line might break. So I just tap it there. If you're wondering why I'm using screws instead of nails, honestly, even if I owned a big nailer, I'd probably still use screws. It does have a couple of benefits. Yeah, it takes a bit longer, but as a DIYer, the benefits just outweigh the cons. I read a lot of comments on videos about ring shank nails. A lot of folks said that the contractors used those nails and they still had a lot of boards popping up every single year. And like I mentioned before, if ever you need to remove a fence panel to bring machinery or do yard work, screws are just so much easier to remove. With nails, you're most likely gonna crack a picket trying to pry them off. But for me, I just don't think I'd be able to look at those crazy nail patterns that are all over the place. My entire fence did take a really long time to complete, but screwing pickets after work became kind of meditative. It felt like yoga for men. Even my son would help out by putting all the screws into the holes.
For the back side, I already put that one in. You kind of just got to go parallel to what was behind it. I just checked this one like this, and then I removed it, and I noticed that this to this right here, it's not perfectly centered, so in some instances, I just double check it and I mark where I think is the center, and then I just put the center of the board up to it. But this is just because on the other side, we end up doing tiny little micro adjustments, and after 3, 4, 5 boards, it's kind of a big difference. So once in a while, you just want to check it.
I realized my explanation wasn't very clear, so let me show you the reason the installation of the backside of the box shadow fence is different from the front. Here's how I start the backside. I take the gap we created on the front, I imagine a line right in the center of it, and I align the picket so it sits perfectly centered behind that gap. So in theory, once the first picket is lined up, you should be able to install every other picket using the same spacer we've been using on the front. That's how it should happen. But if you do that, you can end up with a huge problem. And this happened to me when I did my first 3 panels. And it all comes down to 2 things most people don't think about. Not every picket is the same width. You'd think they are, but they're not. Let me show you. These are the cutoffs from about 2 months ago. Some are a couple of millimeters more, some are less. These are fully dry now, but when I bought them, some boards were wetter than others, and those wet boards can easily be 6 or 7 millimeters wider, or 1/4 of an inch. So imagine how much that throws things off after 12 boards in a row. Another thing too is, if you remember, we did some micro adjustments on the front side to make sure it was plumb every 3 or 4 boards. That affects the gap a tiny bit. And we also did some pretty major adjustments on the spacing on the far end. So all these things combined could affect how the box shadow looks if you just use the spacer board on the back side. So the way I do it is I use the spacer, but only for about 3 boards at a time. Then I stop, I look for the center of the gap, then I transfer that center mark on the top rail, and then I install the next picket perfectly centered to that line. By doing this every few boards, I constantly recorrect the alignment so the backside pickets always land in the center of the gaps.
And now I'm just gonna eyeball it. So there is the center, and I'm gonna do the same with this one. Don't look at it from an angle, look at it, straight on. With my eye, I could tell where the center of the board is. And I tack one at the top, and then after we'll regulate the bottoms.
And what I mean by that is basically a little trick I learned after installing about 1,000 pickets. Once the boards are spaced correctly and tacked at the top, instead of putting a level on every single picket, I just eyeball it. That's why you see my head tilting sideways every 2 seconds. Because here's the thing, if the front side was installed perfectly plumb, the light that shines through the gaps will be perfectly parallel from top to bottom. So if I look at the picket on an angle and the light lines up straight, I know the picket is straight. But if the picket is tilted, even a little, you'll see the light isn't equal all the way down. That's your cue to adjust it, nail it in place, and keep going. I repeated the exact same process on the remaining 2 sides. The only difference here is I had to work around the opening for the pool pump heater so it could blow out the air through the fence. And you'll notice I leave all the pickets that need to be ripped down for last. These ones here are pretty straightforward, so I'll show you how to do it once on the table saw and another with the circular saw.
And now I need 1 3/4 inches. So 1 3/4 inches, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go and cut one that's 1 3/4 inches.
I like to keep the factory edges visible and hide the cut side against the post. Not just for the color, but also because the factory edges have that rounded finish.
Perfect.
This next side is a little curved because I ran out of 4x4s and had to use a 2x4. It just so happens though that it's the perfect distance away to use the spacer as a scribing tool.
I might not even have enough pickets anymore. I only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pickets. Yeah, I'll have enough. Damn, I really calculated it perfectly.
And that brings me to the cost calculator I made for you guys in Excel. So once you've measured your fence outline and done the simple math I showed earlier, let's say you end up with 26 posts total, -1 means you'll have 25 fence panels to install. All you have to do is enter the prices of materials in your area at the time you're building the fence and the number of posts you're installing. The sheet will automatically calculate everything for you: 25 pickets per 8-foot section, the exact amount of 2x4s, how many screws you'll need to install both the pickets and the brackets, and how many bags of concrete to buy. So if you want to build the same fence style as me, I'll leave a link to this Excel sheet in the description below, completely for free. All I ask of you is to hit the like button, maybe leave a comment, and share it with your fence buddies. I guess now we just gotta build a gate, so let's get right back into it and finish the gate. If you haven't seen it already, I have a full video on how to build a gate that won't sag. This is actually the 4th gate I've built on my property, and that video goes into all the detail plus a little physics lesson. And if you want to see what this fence looks like once the landscaping is done with all the 12-volt lighting, I also have a video about that, and I cover everything you need to know so you can do it yourself. This really changed the vibe in our backyard, and you'll really see why this fence style works so well with 12-volt lighting. So which video you're gonna watch next? The gate or the 12-volt landscape lighting? Or both? Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave me a comment. And I'll see you in the next one.